Hello, welcome to the GPP Chin Music Podcast. I'm Big Italy 42. He is Scott Mayo. Got Sports 25 to life, and we're talking about all of your options, potential for tonight's GPP action on FanDuel and DraftKings, and it's going to be an interesting one because there's quite a few teams with high totals. There's also some really low totals, like the 5.5 that Clayton Kershaw is in tonight. So, going to be interesting to see. First off, Clayton Kershaw is obviously your top option, $13,100 on DraftKings, 12.3 on FanDuel. So he's the guy you're going to want a ton of exposure to. But I'm wondering at that price what his ownership is going to be like in GPPs. But especially on a place like DraftKings where you play two pitchers, I'm still going to have a ton of Clayton Kershaw because his upside is just tremendous tonight.
Yeah, I think if you're going to go really cheap anywhere, I think you're probably going to want to look at a really cheap second pitcher than giving up Kershaw. Honestly, I mean, it's so hard to go away from him. There's a couple other solid plays towards the top. I think Tanaka and Archer are both decent plays. I prefer Tanaka against the Tampa Bay offense, but I mean Archer's been so good lately that I don't feel really great about going against him. That's the tough part for me. I mean, my second favorite pitcher probably is Michael Wacha against San Diego, but at 9.9, I mean, it saves you a little over 3,000 on DraftKings. I mean, it's just so tough to go away from Kershaw. It's such a low over/under, such a big favorite. I mean, we know the Mets' offense is terrible. It's really hard to do anything else.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I think Archer probably of those guys would be the lowest owned because obviously Tampa Bay offense has been awful recently, and I think that Tanaka will be a pretty popular GPP play, maybe even in cash games too, just because of how bad they've been. But like you said, Archer, I mean, he's got monstrous upside as well. I mean, he's got a great strikeout rate. I mean, not quite Clayton Kershaw, but not far behind. Kershaw's at 32.9 on the season, and Archer's at 31.2. So actually really similar numbers across the board. Same walk rate, similar fly ball rate, similar FIP. I mean, very similar numbers across the board. So I think that, if you find a cheap, maybe a cheap team that you're stacking, I love putting Clayton Kershaw and Chris Archer in a lineup and then seeing what bats I can fit in with them. And it's going to be obviously kind of prohibitive. You're going to need a couple of cheap guys there, but Archer probably my favorite guy there because we know he's got four 10-plus strikeout games in his last 7 starts. So just big time upside.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of GPP plays tonight, like you mentioned right at the top. It'll be interesting to see what Kershaw's ownership percentage is in GPPs because, especially in DraftKings, you can't stack a lot of these teams and play Kershaw.
Yep.
Especially the high over/under ones. I mean, some of these stacks get expensive, and I mean, you can't even if you went with the absolute cheapest pitcher, sometimes it's hard to fit some of these stacks in here. So it'll be interesting. I think he's going to be something outrageous, like 60, 70% in cash games, despite these prices. But in GPPs, I mean, if he's down around 30, 40, you're going to want him. I mean, you're eliminating a ton of the field right there, and then you just got to worry about hitting the value batters and stuff like that. It makes it tough because, I mean, some of these guys are really good GPP plays. And the problem is you need their absolute best game to get anywhere near what Kershaw is probably going to give you 80% of the time tonight, I would say.
Yeah.
So it just makes it a really tricky night if you're trying to go away from Kershaw and if you're trying to spend up on batters.
Yeah, exactly. Like you mentioned, I mean, you kind of expect Kershaw in this matchup, this low total, to get you 35-plus fantasy points tonight. I mean, more often than not, he's going to do that in this matchup. So, like I said, you got to catch up a lot if you go with one of these guys. So, you made a good point where you almost want to go a lot cheaper if you're going to go cheaper, so that way you can get some bigger bats. An interesting guy right around the middle price there is Trevor Bauer, $7,600. Obviously, Pittsburgh, nice ballpark for pitchers. Pittsburgh's an offense that has been inconsistent at times this season, but then again, so is Trevor Bauer. That's why he's only a tournament option. 23.4% strikeout rate you like, but you don't like the 10.9% walk rate or 45% fly ball rate. So, I mean, there's some risk with that, but at $7,600 on DraftKings especially, I think he's a really strong GPP play with some big upside. $8,400 on FanDuel, a little bit more prohibitive, especially as one pitcher, because as we've seen before, if Trevor Bauer has one of his bad games, your entire lineup is pretty shot. So I think he makes for a much better play on DraftKings.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, outside of that, there's not a ton else I like. as far as cheap guys go. I think you nailed the guys I'm looking at for the most part. I think Ubaldo is probably the number one guy I'm going with if we're talking mid-range or below guys. Um, Julio Teheran is like an interesting guy today to me against Philly, but there's a lot of rain concerns there, it looks like. So who knows how long he'll get to pitch into that game with a couple possible delays coming. He's a nice favorite, pretty low over under at 7.5. He's a guy I look at, but he's even a little bit more pricey than Ubaldo. I mean, in terms of like really cheap guys on DraftKings, you compare with Kershaw. There's not a lot to love either, honestly. I mean, you're looking at Chase Anderson against the Rockies, maybe. That's in Arizona in a really good hitter's park that has been really good lately, especially with the heat, stuff like that. He's only 5,300 though, so he's an option if you're trying to get batters in with Kershaw. It's a pretty high over/under, but Michael Lorenzen for Cincinnati, only 4,400, I think is the obvious punt option here. I mean, he's a small favorite against a Milwaukee team that hasn't been great against righties all year. He's turned in a couple good starts lately. I mean, he's racking up 6+ strikeouts in 4 of the last 5. Went 7 innings twice already since he took over starting. Obviously not a guy I love, but at 4,400, he's been 12+ DraftKings points in 6 of his 7 starts. And you can definitely do a lot worse than that when you're pairing someone with Kershaw who can make up those points.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I mean, like you said, $4,400. I mean, there's a ton of batters more expensive than him. So if he gets you 10 to 12 points, I mean, you're thrilled at that price tag. Maybe he gets the win, maybe he doesn't. But really, at that price tag, I mean, that's just an added bonus. You just need him to give you a quality start and just not kill your team at that point. So I'm with you there. I think he's the best cheap option. And, yeah, like you said, these other guys, Jesse Chavez is a pretty good option, but he doesn't have a ton of upside. He did have a 37-point game against San Diego, and this is a pretty bad Seattle offense right now. So at 7,000, I like him, but I think he's more of a cash game play for me than a tournament play.
Yeah, I think so too. That's what he's been this year. I mean, last year he had some more of that strikeout upside. Like he had 11 strikeouts in the game against San Diego, like you mentioned. Yeah. Which, I mean, he was doing not quite that, but a little more like that last year quite a bit, racking up 8-9 strikeouts in games. He's been more around like 6. I think he's averaging about 6.1 strikeouts per start since he got over that early season rough patch. I mean, that's okay, but like you mentioned, it's about the matchup there. I mean, Seattle's offense has really been struggling. Kazmir looked really good against them yesterday. Chavez is, I mean, good enough. At 7,000 on DraftKings, he's probably a really solid cash game price play. I'm just not expecting him to, like, throw 7 shutout innings and strike out 8 guys, which is, I mean, what you're looking for in GPPs. I don't see that happening today. I mean, that's probably his max upside, honestly. So he looks more like a cash game play to me. I agree.
Yeah, and there's no way I'm playing him on FanDuel at $8,700 as my only pitcher. That's just too pricey for me tonight. All right, let's move over here to catcher, where there's some interesting options here, of course. One guy I really like is Sal Perez against Tommy Malone, $3,800. I think he's certainly in play for cash games as well on FanDuel, where he's nearly minimum salary. But I really like going that route as well. And then once again, Wellington Castillo, if he's in the lineup, got a really nice price tag, especially on DraftKings at just $3,200. I'm looking at him as well. And then, I mean, outside of that, of course, Matt Wieters at $4,000 if he's playing today. But we've also seen him get some. He had yesterday off. You assume he's going to be back today. But outside of that, really not a lot at catcher. I mean, Brian McCann's guy you like to target at home, but I don't like playing anyone against Chris Archer.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I mean, I don't want to be running hitters out there against some of these aces today. I'm going to try to avoid them as much as possible. For the most part, especially with having to fit Kershaw into most of my lineups, I mean, I'm going to be defaulting towards cheap guys with good matchups rather than like good players with good prices and bad matchups. So that's where I'm going to try and save money today, is in those kind of situations. At catcher, I mean, I'm going to be looking at as many cheap guys as possible. I don't mind Lucroy. If I'm going to pay up, I think that's who I'm going with, as long as I don't have Lorenzen in the lineup. He's cheaper on FanDuel. I think he's right at 3,000. It's a little more expensive on DraftKings, so it makes it tougher.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think he's in a fine spot. And like I said, Lorenzen is an adequate pitcher, and that's it. He's nothing special. He's not terrible. Definitely a guy that you can hit. And I know that his first start this season, Ryan Braun took him deep twice, so keep that in mind. We'll get to him here in a minute. But so he's definitely prone to getting hit, especially in that ballpark. First base options, of course, Paul Goldschmidt's your top option. Hopefully we didn't need to tell you that, but especially against Kyle Kendrick, who's terrible against lefties and against righties. $6,000. Going to be really tough to fit him in any Kershaw lineup tonight, but in your GPPs, maybe when you go with two guys that aren't Kershaw, or maybe you pair Kershaw with Lorenzen, whatever you want to do, Goldschmidt's a great option if you can fit him. A couple other interesting options. Adam Lind has become more of a tournament option due to his rising price tag on both sites, but I think he's in a really good spot as well. Another guy who's really interesting, despite being away from Toronto, Edwin Encarnacion gets Anibal Sanchez, who's had big-time struggles with home runs this year. He hasn't been a bad pitcher by any means, but allowed 1.54 home runs per 9, which is just way, way higher than you like it to be. And obviously Encarnacion's got power in Nate Park. Yeah,
definitely. Solid GPP play there. A couple guys that have solid prices in good matchups. Joey Votto against Mike Fiers, who's dealt with some home run issues himself. Adrian Gonzalez against Syndergaard, I think, is an okay play at 3,800 on DraftKings. I think he's only 3,000 on FanDuel too.
28 now.
2,800 now. I think that must have been yesterday then.
Yep.
I think he's a fine play. Not anything I'm super excited about, but as far as getting the guy for 2,800 with some upside, it's really hard to argue with Adrian Gonzalez there. Not a ton else I like at first base. I think if I'm going remotely cheap, I'm going to be looking at Gonzalez, Votto. Otherwise, I'm going to try and pay up for Goldschmidt. I don't mind Albert Pujols against Chichi Gonzalez today, but he's 5,200 on DraftKings. I think he's pretty expensive on FanDuel too, 46 or 47.
Yep.
There's not really like anyone that really stands out to me as a great price play at first base. So that's probably why I'm going to be looking at Adrian Gonzalez quite a bit, because if you can save a little bit of money there compared to like Goldschmidt or something, you can do a little bit more. You have a little more flexibility in the rest of your lineup.
Yeah, completely agree. And I'll throw out one more guy. Billy Butler gets a lefty. He's been hitting the ball really well. He's 3,500 on DraftKings, 28 on FanDuel. So if I am going to punt, not something I'm a big fan of, but I think he's a decent option if you're trying to save at first base tonight. Second base options, you got to like Jason Kipnis against Charlie Morton. Charlie Morton really good against righties, not so good against lefties, so he's certainly in play. As we know, he's been one of the better, more consistent hitters in the game throughout the entire season. And then another really interesting one, Luis Valbuena at Boston. Price has really gotten up there for a guy who doesn't hit for any average at all, but when he does get hits, they go a long way. Half of his hits this season are extra base hits, so really like him as a tournament option. And then I'll throw out Colton Wong as well. Andrew Kachner's been really bad against lefties this year. 394 WOBA allowed, so all the Cardinals lefties are in play, but Colton Wong got more power than most of these guys here, so I like him a lot.
Yeah, that's probably my favorite play overall, is Wong. Yep. The other guy I like quite a bit today, at least on DraftKings, or second base eligible, Steve Pearce against Danks. I mean, it's hard not to like all of the righties for Baltimore today against Danks, so he's going to be one of my top ones. I like Zobrist a little bit too against J.A. Happ, hitting from the right side of the plate where he has some nice power. Johnny Giavotella against Chichi Gonzalez is a cheaper option that I'll be looking at quite a bit. He's 3,000 on DraftKings. I think he's minimum 2,200 on FanDuel. So he's a guy I'm going to be playing a decent amount, I think, as a value option at second base.
Yeah, completely agree there. And I'll throw out a couple more guys. Scooter Gennett, more so on DraftKings, where he's 3,600, 31 on FanDuel. I really don't like that price very much. And then Aaron Hill, he's $3,500 on DraftKings. He's 24 on FanDuel. Not a guy that you love, but you got to love the matchup, really, for anyone against Kyle Kendrick. He's a cheap way to get yourself some exposure with that big total.
Yeah, definitely. I like that play also. I think we covered most of the second baseman I'm going to be looking at. The only other one I have at all as a GPP play is Neil Walker, who's been up and down basically all season, but hitting from the left side of the plate against Bauer tonight. If Bauer has a poor game, I think Walker could be a big beneficiary of that, especially if he's hitting in the middle of the lineup as usual.
Yeah, good point. And his price kind of getting up there, which makes it more of a tournament play. So, yeah, that's a really good call there. Third base options, I love Todd Frazier against Mike Fiers. You already mentioned his long ball struggles. Frazier has a ton of power, especially in that ballpark. Other options at third base, Maikel Franco against Julio Teheran, who, once again, another fly ball pitcher. Maikel Franco, as we've seen, has a ton of power, so you got to like him. And then third base only on DraftKings. He's an outfielder on FanDuel, but he has Manny Tomas at $4,200 against Kyle Kendrick. I like him in the outfield as well at FanDuel, but if you're looking for third base here specifically, he's in a really good spot too.
Yep. Matt Carpenter, you mentioned all the lefties for St. Louis. He's a fine play today. Cash games, GPPs, whatever. Kyle Seager is a decent GPP option at 3,300 on DraftKings. I think he's 26 on FanDuel. Against Chavez, if he's not on today, I think that's a fine play. My top GPP plays Manny Machado against Danks. Like I mentioned, I like all the Orioles there. He's the obvious one. I think he's going to be pretty heavily owned, though. In terms of the more expensive guys, I think he's going to be one of the most popular ones.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. I mean, he's going to be, and rightfully so. It's a really good spot for him and that whole team. So, one more guy I'll throw out, Cody Ash. Not a very good hitter in general, but if you look at Tehran splits, 409 will allow the lefties. He's $2,800 on DraftKings. I believe he's $2,400 on FanDuel. So, a nice upside play there. You're not expecting a big game out of him, but either way, Tehran has had big time issues with lefties. So I like targeting him there.
Yep.
Shortstop options, going to be interesting tonight. You get Hanley Ramirez, of course, you can play on DraftKings, and he's really starting to get it going. Obviously, you prefer him against the lefty, but Dan Straley's been a pretty bad righty, as you mentioned earlier. Boston's in a really good spot tonight. So Hanley homered last night. He's got 3 in his last 7. Definitely looking his way, especially on DraftKings where you can play him at shortstop. And then, of course, Carlos Correa. He's pricey, but he's hitting the ball hard. I mean, he's not having a ton of success, batting ball success, I should say. But, I mean, there's nobody in the league, actually nobody in the league, hitting the ball harder than he is right now.
Yeah, definitely. As far as cheaper options go, like J.J. Hardy against a lefty, John Danks, another Oriole I'll be looking at quite a bit. Gene Segura, I think, is a fine play for pretty cheap on FanDuel, at least. He's 3,800 on DraftKings. I don't feel so good about that one. Not a ton else I like at shortstop. Marcus Semien, I think, is an okay play against a lefty, but he's been hitting so low in the order lately that he's been really, really tough to play. Unless he's back up in the second hole where he's hitting against lefties somewhat this year, I'd have a really hard time playing him if he's hitting 8th or 9th. Troy Tulowitzki, I think, is a fine option at the top again if you have the money to pay for him. 4,800 against Anderson in Arizona. He's been quiet over the last couple games, but has looked better. He's been getting on base basically every game at least once. So he's a strong cash game play, and I assume he's going to be pretty low owned because of Kershaw today. So it makes him a pretty decent GPP play also. Yeah,
I'm with you on that one as well. And outside of that, really nobody that you love at shortstop. Like I said, Xander Bogaerts, because he's part of the Boston stack, especially where he's still really cheap on FanDuel, 2,700. Outfield options now. There's not a ton of guys that are really expensive that you really feel like you need to pay for. At least I don't. I really like David Peralta today. He's hitting the ball really well. Same thing goes for his teammate AJ Pollock. They're both similarly priced on both sites, right around 4K, a little bit higher on DraftKings. I like both of those guys. Love Ryan Braun against Michael Lorenzen. That whole thing, he hit 2 homers off him the first time they matched up, and actually, he hit 2 homers in that game. It might not have been both off Lorenzen, but either way, he hit a home run off of Lorenzen, and it was funny because they talked to him after the game, Lorenzen that was, and he said that Braun was his favorite player since he's young, much, much younger. And I can't imagine that feels too good, giving up a home run to your favorite player, but maybe he's happy for him. But either way, he's probably my favorite expensive option in the outfield tonight.
Yeah, Trout is the other one I like a ton, but at 5,900 on DraftKings, he's awfully hard to pay for.
Yeah.
I like targeting Chichi Gonzalez again today, though. I think I'm going to have a lot of Angels. I really like Cole Calhoun quite a bit tonight as an outfielder, as a lefty in that matchup. He's awfully pricey on DraftKings, but he's pretty cheap on FanDuel. So I think he's going to be a solid GPP play on both. Another right-handed Orioles hitter, Nolan Reimold, if he's in the lineup, I think is a really solid play. Jock Peterson at 3,900 on DraftKings, I think is a really solid GPP play. Lorenzo Cain is probably more of a cash game play against a lefty in Malone, but he's really the only Royal that I like when they face a lefty. And he's just been so solid against them all season. He has a stolen base upside, obviously, also. So he's a pretty good one-off play, although he's pretty expensive on DraftKings, too, a little bit cheaper on FanDuel also.
Yeah, Mookie Betts, another guy that's been on fire recently.
Yeah.
He's in a great spot as well. And then when you look for other guys, I like Jason Hayward. I like to target more of these lefties against Andrew Kashner. He's still just 3,500 on FanDuel, so I think he's in a great spot there. And then Brandon Moss, got to like him against Charlie Morton. you don't love the ballpark, but at the same time, Brandon Moss, a lefty against Morton. That's a way that I'm targeting as well. And then, interesting one, as he has been recently, just continues to just crush the ball. Alejandro De Aza still just does not have good lineup spot, but hasn't really needed one to produce him. He's been one of the better hitters in the game, honestly, over the past week and a half or so. So I think a lot of people will be off him due to his price, but I think that targeting him at a really low ownership is a really good way to go in tournaments tonight.
Yeah, a couple really good value plays, I think, tonight. Eddie Rosario's been hitting second in the lineup against righties from Minnesota. He's only 3,100 on DraftKings, really cheap on FanDuel. I think he's a really solid play. My favorite one for GPP is Johnny Gomes. He's been hitting 30 against lefties. He's only 2,800 on DraftKings, which is an absolute steal. I think he's going to be in a ton of my GPP lineups on DraftKings. He's a really strong one. If you're not a big fan of Tanaka tonight, David DeJesus has been hitting 3-4 for Tampa Bay against righties. He's 2,800. Andre Ethier, I mean, he's been the same for like 3 weeks now. He's underpriced on both sites. Anytime he's facing a righty, he's been hitting 6th in the order, right behind a lot of the guys for the Dodgers that have had really strong seasons lately. I mean, he's probably a little bit more of a cash game play, but he's been showing off a little bit of upside too lately in the games that they've been putting up some runs as a team. So I like him quite a bit. Another guy we've been talking about, a lefty that's hitting 4th in the lineup for Cleveland, David Murphy, continues to be solid. He's facing a righty in Morton tonight that doesn't scare me. He's right around 3,000 on DraftKings. He's a pretty solid one. Dominic Brown's back for Philly. I think he's an interesting GPP play also around that same price tag on both sites. Preston Tucker. I mean, there's a lot of quality value bats in the outfield today. I'd like to see Preston Tucker hitting higher in the lineup than he has lately, but against Masterson, who has a lot of home run problems, I like him quite a bit. I'm just hoping he's not hitting in that 7 spot like he has been the last couple of games.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And I'll throw out one more guy, Steven Souza. If you're not playing Tanaka has had some issues with home runs so far this year, decrease of velocity, all those things. So he, and as well as Joey Butler, I think that Tampa Bay is going to be really low owned, especially because we mentioned Tanaka in this matchup against Tampa Bay team. It's really been struggling. I mean, you're gonna be hard pressed ever finding this low of ownership for Tampa Bay bats.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they're going to be super low owned, even though they're all really cheap. You mentioned David Peralta when we started Outfield, right? Okay, just wanted to make sure we covered that one. And then Adam Jones is my other really strong GBP play today. He hasn't been. We know he started out the season really hot against lefties. He's cooled off quite a bit. But at 4,400 on DraftKings against a lefty, I feel awfully good about him. I know he's been missing some time with injuries and stuff like that, but he's reached base in 5 straight games now. I think he has a hit in 4 of the last 5. I think he walked last night for his only on base. But I feel like he's a really strong GPP play tonight because he's facing Danks. I mean, people are going to stack the Orioles, but I think that's going to be most of his ownership today is in Orioles stacks. So he's a guy that I like quite a bit outside of Orioles stacks to complement another stack or something like that, because I don't think a lot of people that aren't playing Orioles stacks are going to have him.
Yeah, that's a really good call right there. And with that's going to wrap things up for us. Find us on Twitter at DFCafe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check out our Optimizer Colossus and all of our other great content at dailyfantasycafe.com.